You're listening to Ukrainapodden, a podcast from Nettavisen. My name is Tormod Malvin Sæther, and I'm the host for today. With me in the studio, I have my podcast companion.
Jørn Sund-Henriksen, Ukraine columnist in Nettavisen and the leader of the Norwegian-Ukrainian Friendship Association.
And it's a big pleasure to welcome Yaroslav Sorry, we practiced this before we started. Yurchyshyn.
Exactly.
Yaroslav Yurchyshyn, Ukrainian MP.
Yes.
Welcome to Ukrainapodden.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for coming. And we also have Oleg Magaletsky. Welcome to the podcast.
Nice to meet you.
And you're the founder of Free Nations Post-Russia Forum. And that's the reason we have both of you in the studio. And your, goal is to make Russia smaller. Is that correct?
We are working to have the long-term peace and stability in Europe, in Arctic, in our common world, and it's impossible without making Moscow small again. Yeah, so it's our directional work.
Why is that? Why do you think it's important to make Russia smaller?
Yeah, it's 2 points. First one, in our common European history, unfortunately, we have the story of imperialistic powers. And in Europe, in past, we have a British Empire, French Empire, Spanish Empire, Portuguese Empire, Dutch Empire, Belgian Empire, and Ottoman Empire. But all of them are gone. But there is the last imperialistic power in Europe, it's Russia, or better say Moscovia, is a classic colonial empire which used captive nation and their colonies for two main reasons. First one, they took peoples from these captive nations to use them like a meat in their military aggression, now from against Ukraine, but in previous time it was against other country and will be in the future against new one if we don't stop them. At second point, there is no Russia, gas, oil, diamonds, or uranium. Everything it's come from Siberia, Bashkortostan, Tatarstan, Astrakhan, Buryatia, Sakha, and on. So Moscow could finance their repression inside and aggression outside only because they use the colonies. So it's first point. And second point, we have a situation now when Moscow isn't alone. She already created this axis of dictatorship. I call it Cringe axis of the first name of China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, greatest evil. So it's very important to also look not only for Russia, Moscow as colonial empire, but the main area of Russia is People's Republic of China. The same situation. They also have captured nation, Tibet, East Turkestan, Manchuria, and so on, and they use it also to be a threat for a whole three worlds. So my point and why we create this platform, and we are now today in Norway, and we really appreciate all help and support which Norwegian people and Norway as a country provide for both Ukraine and free world. Thank you one more time for that. We should be not just reflective in our way. We should have our foresight, strategy, and roadmaps of acting, how we could stop these colonial imperialistic powers. Because if we don't stop them, the war in Ukraine is not only about Ukraine. It's about to destroy European Atlantic Union and to destroy a rule-based order. So our point is we should find option how to prevent them to start a much more bigger war. And we think that decolonization, so it could be the real win-win scenario, how captive nation could become free, independent. At least they should have the opportunity to self-determination, and it will create a new architecture of collective security, both in European, Pacific, and Arctic. So it's really benefits for all parties.
The last time we met was in London in October 23. I think it was the 7th Free Nation Post-Russia Forum.
Yep.
I discovered that by accident, and I reached out to you, and you invited me to come speak. But that was really fascinating and interesting, because you had, in those forums, you gather people from the exile movements of all these nations. So I believe I met people from Ingria, from Dagestan, Bashkortostan.
Crimea, Tatarstan also were there.
and of course from Chechnya and Ingushetia. Lots of nations, some of them I've heard of before, but for example, Ingria, which is a Baltic nation, the fourth Baltic nation, and has a rich history with Norway, is something that I hadn't heard of before. So it is interesting that we have all these nations and languages and histories that has just been erased through Russian imperialism.
Yeah, it's pity because, you know, the Russian, or better say, Moscovian propaganda is so successful. They do it not for decades, for centuries, that people all the world, even, for example, in countries which were a part of this colonial empire in the past, like Estonia, Ukraine, Poland, or Finland, we don't know what Russia really is in this captive nation. A lot of people don't know. So some people in the West think that people from Königsberg, which now called Kaliningrad, which was the East Prussian city, or Poland city Królewec, or Lithuanian city Karaliaučius, till people in occupied Japanese land Karafuta, which Moscovites call Sakhalin, are the same. No, there is dozens of captive nations and even ethnical Russian people who speak Russian, but in Siberia, in Ural region, in far East region, they are different from the Moscovites, and they feel different. Their self-determination and identification. And it's very important also here in Northern Europe to understand that, for example, both ethnical Russia in Ingria region or Pskov region, Pskov Republic was part of Hansa Union. It was a part of our common European land before Moscovites make the genocide there. And like the Novgorod Republic, it was Democratic Republic. It wasn't the part of this in bad meaning despotic land like was, for example, Moscow Duch at that time. And now there is different movements in Karelia. Also, for example, it's not far away from Norway, Pomoria region. It's modern Arkhangelsk Oblast in Russia. Or, for example, Murmansk region, Poland. They also have some movements of people who understand that Moscow uses just like a colonies. And it's very important to promote, to advocate, give voice of these persons. And I very thankful Yaroslav, the member of Ukrainian parliament from the party which in English calls voice, not to help only Ukrainian people inside to have a voice, but to provide the voice of captive nation and building the bridges between captive nation and region and free nation in Europe. Because even, you know, I'm like Ukrainian. We were a part of this colony more than 300 years, and we know how they work. But even when I read a lot of memoirs of different politicals, even Churchill, when he wrote his memoirs and he said USSR, he means Russia. And he always used Russia, Russia, Russia. So at that time, in this name of Russia Empire was Estonian, Ukrainian, Lithuanian, Kazakh people, Azerbaijan people. But even for Churchill, everyone was Russia. So I think it's very important to educate, to promote, and at least to speak and to know, for example, that people in Chechen Republic of Ichkeria, which now occupied by Moscovites, it never was a part of Russian Federation. They didn't sign any agreement with Russia. They became independent in 1991 from the USSR, not from Russia Federation. That these people and people, for example, in Sakha region, in northern part of Eurasia, they have nothing common with Muscovite. Only this vertical of colonial rule and repression. And these people should have the same opportunity to self-determinate like it have people in Kosovo or in Palestine or other part in the world. So we should try to make their voices louder.
How do you see the chances for making Russia, to split Russia into smaller countries again? Like, because right now it's, I guess it's fair to say that Russia is clearly still trying to get bigger and get more territory on the cost of Ukraine. But do you see any realistic way forward to make your goal come true?
Yes, of course. Because any imperialistic state before destroying was very active in occupation nearest territory, or when we're talking about modern empire occupied territory far from their lands, say in Africa, in Asia country, in Latin America. So Russia, the less modernized empire ever been, due to they occupied only who near them, because of they don't have technology as now so in medieval years to occupy territory far from their center. So now it's a reality that Putin regime is the most centralized in Russia history, maybe from Stalin time. Due to that, Putin need a war, because it give his team possibility to control everything, to use all these sources for one goal, to occupy Ukraine. And but it's made this state more fragile, because yes, when Bashkort began, even not politician movement, but movement for save their ecology, because we do understand that Moscow and partly St. Petersburg, so central power try to use all sources from occupied territory, all information channels, all internet channels blocked by central government. Why? Because they do afraid all this movement. And one of the main mistake as for Western countries, so for us as Ukraine, a long period of time we try to look on Russia like a unity. But when we analyzed Russia like very diverse structure, we can find who will be democratic alternative. And yes, the main logical alternative to centralized Putin regime is give possibility to native people, to people who lives centuries on this territory, because Tatars in Kazan lives far before the mixed Finno-Greek Slavonic part of inhabitants of Moscow kingdom come to them, yes, and occupy Kazan. So if we give them possibility to self-determination, they never ever will maintain or will vote for war in Ukraine, because they don't have this imperialistic myth about Russia empire from sea to sea and so on. And yes, we do understand that only way to win in this war is not appease but defeat Russia. Why? Because yes, we know very good what happened in Chechnya, in Northern Caucasian Republic, which proclaimed their independence after USSR was broken, and they create a very civilized, democratic country, even in time war with Russia, with Yeltsin regime, which Western country, and we looks like quite democratic, but still for Russian imperialist democracy finished their imperial interest. Due to that, what we can do in short period of time, what we done in our parliament. I was one of the initiator to create a special ad hoc commission to create new type of policy to save human rights of people from captive nation of Russia. We adopt few proclamation to show how deeply Russia ruin all human rights approach. First of all, it's about recognizing Ichkerian Republic, Chechnya as occupied country. Second, we recognize genocide policy against Ingush. And it was deportation of Cherkess Adyks, a very big, more than 2 million inhabitants of Northern Caucasus territory, which majority now even not in Russia. And all genocide deportations start even not in USSR time, in Russian Empire time, but still a lot of Adyks and Cherkess lives there, have connection around the world, have very strong movement, but they don't have any real representation in Russia. We have a joke that Russia it's not a federation, as they call themselves, but fake federation, because any influence even of this so-called real region don't have. And now we, on the start of next steps, we prepared special draft law about how we, as independent country, will try to help captured nation to have their voice, to have their place in a global agenda, to save their life and to give them a mechanism to save their human rights. Because yes, it's very popular in European Union to see so-called official opposition from Moscow, which really opposition, but in majority they so imperialistic minded. And when we ask our colleagues, I'm a member of Parliamentarian Assembly from Ukraine to OSCE, why when we invite Navalny, we don't invite, for example, leader of Jahar Dudayev, leader of Chechnya, who lives in Stockholm. The same situation, leader of opposition who will be killed by Putin regime. Why it's so unjust to Russia ethnical we give voice, to Chechnya who fight for their independence. Moscow never ever from time of Bolotna don't have a real activity against. Chechnya we don't give. So our first position is create mechanism in Ukraine. And why it's for us, not because we biased to Russia. We have connection with indigenous captured nations from 19th, because we have embassy of Tatarstan from 1991, long period of time, till Putin closed that possibility to have this economic situation. And we even have several united economy activity, for example, in oil production. We have Ukraine Tatar oil company, long period of time. But we have in our history period then, due to we don't have a presentation on a global level after First World War, Ukraine was destroyed by Soviet Russia, so-called USSR, become a big part of USSR only due to no one hear us in that time. Why? Because we don't have representatives. For us, situation are better because now we see that all Western world is our allies in this war. And I repeat, great thanks for Norwegian nation and Norwegian government, because without weapon, without your help, we will be still fight. We would fight because we don't have our choice, it for our freedom, but it will be more harder. It will be really a question of our existing. Captured nation of Russia without us don't have a representative. Why I do thanks Oleg for his and colleagues' initiative, because when it's done by government, it will be looks like, okay, Ukraine creates some separatist moving on territory of Russia to destroy Russia, but it's starting from NGO, from society. And it's starting why? Because we see the situation, if we not help this nation, they just stop exist in generally.
Sorry, if I have time, I want to add, I totally agree with Yaroslav that Russia is fragile. No one, somebody asks, are they strong, are they weak? It's like the Moscovia Schrödinger. It depends one time you will open this box. Because if you believe that they are strong and you are don't preparing for stop them, they become strong. They are fighting against Ukraine 11 years. And unfortunately, also their militaries in Trum become better. And they...
But now in this example, we see how Russia is fragile, because when they start war, they say, okay, we will occupy territory of Ukraine for 3 days, 11 years.
And if we are preparing, or if Ukraine have this weapon, which we have now 3 years ago, probably Russia would finish very quickly. But we weren't prepared, and we aren't prepared now, unfortunately, even though there is a drones attack against the Nordics country for last week, and Poland and Estonia were under some hybrid actions 2 weeks ago. We're just sitting. Unfortunately, we're not acting, and we have just reflection. Not proactive, and some asymmetric offensive action which could be done to stop them. But I will come back. So Russia also weak in some option, because they have nothing in common inside this huge land. When somebody thinking about Russia, we should admit that it's 70 million kilometers. It's much more than whole South America. So just imagine that people from some Mexico states in even north part of America, and people in the Fireland Island are the same. Of course, they're not the same. Even if they speak Spanish, or Catholic, they are quite different. So same situation there. And we have example 2 times with this empire, first and second stage of its dissolution, which were in 1922, and the second one 1991. So if you look just back in 1916 autumn, there was a huge story of Romanov's empire. They have such called Brusilov Prorыв, Brusilov offensive. So they were very successful in Western Front and Eastern Front for the Western Europe, when they occupied a part of, at that time, Austro-Hungarian Empire. It's modern Ukraine. And if you read the newspapers of Romanov Empire in the end of 1916, they were preparing to celebrate new 1917th year in Constantinople, so in Istanbul, because it was one of the main targets of Romanov Empire to occupy the Balkans and Istanbul.
Yeah.
But then, just February 1917, and from nothing become the first dissolution. And if you also read their articles, and not only analytic of think tanks, but even intelligence, for example, for 1985 or 1988, no one pretends that USSR will collapse. Mm-hmm. So we have the 2 histories, and our point not to be like the same Russia do, creation some psyop, creations as fake Republic of Lugansk or Donetsk or Crimea referendum. No, we when we support the movements of captive nation from Ichkeria or Tatarstan, they have history from Ingria for more than 30 years. But Russia propaganda, Russia FSB, kill people, make in prison, or they live in gates. So our point not to create some simulacre, but to help real people on the ground, Grey Roots initiative, to become louder.
Yeah, because this is an important point, because all these nations have a long history. Mm-hmm. Some of them were occupied by Russia quite late. The Chechnya genocide, for example, that happened in late 1800s.
Yes.
I hadn't heard about this before I visited your forum, but I've read a lot into it, and it's considered the most complete genocide in history, because they killed over 90% of the population. And they were at war with Muscovy for several decades. And when they finally gave up and signed a peace treaty around 1880, I think, then the genocide happened after the war. So they weren't killed during the war with Muscovy, but when they made peace with Moscow, then the genocide started. So about the time when we had parliamentarism in Norway. When we took, or our parliament took the power from the king, at the same time, there were letters going from Chorisia to Moscow and St. Petersburg reporting how many villages they had killed, because they surrounded the villages and killed everyone there. And the Chorisians were allied with Crimea. So when the Chorisians were wiped out, then Moscow also took the Crimea Peninsula. So there's this story as well that Crimea has always been Russian, but it hasn't. It was occupied in the late 1800s.
It's a funny story, but Crimea, so-called Orda, the Crimea statehood, was so Moscow was under management of Crimea Tatars.
Yeah.
Historically, Crimean Tatars ruling, and Moscow must to pay some money to let them not be a part of Crimea Tatars.
Not to be burned in Moscow two times like they do it before.
So it was like it's very good example saying how Russia. So Russia really a very modern created country. Only Tsar Petro I.
Petro the Great, like we call him.
Okay,
sorry for that, because they can't probably don't understand Ukrainian.
Better than mass-killing psychopath.
Yes. It was the last Moscovian king, and become Tsar and become empire. And he take not their native named Russia. It's like westernized Rus, which was created in Kiev. So
Kiev
it's
Rus.
very strange situation. And it was in 18th century. Only in 18th century. Due to that, they must to create a history, because all Western countries have long history from Vikings and Nordic times, with long history of their king's family roots, and but Russia don't have that. They partly take different part of history, and due to that they must occupy Crimea. Why? Because Crimea was their master a long period of time, several 100 years. Our giant guilty as civilized world is that many of tribes and even nation in Russia or destroyed, as a big number of small Siberian tribe very close to Inuits or Sayomi people. But for example, Cherkess, they have their statehood more developed, contact with Great Britain, with Turkey, with Persia, yes, when Russia not exist. And Russia destroyed into shell. So really now, as I said previously, they even don't have their own region. So they have Karabayevo-Cherkessia, but the Cherkess and minority.
Only the name of region.
Yes. So
and they live, many of them, in Turkey.
Majority of them live in Turkey and in Hashemite's kingdom of Jordania, because they was replaced. And now each area, no less than 2 million people in Russia and near the same number around the world on this stage, because they create hybrid regimes. So it's like pretend that each area is self-regulated by one clan, which FSB totally controlled. But in reality, they do everything to push out men who can fight with them out of the country. And a lot of them now fighting in the Ukrainian army. We have several battalions of Ichkerian people.
Yes, because there are several of these nations that have volunteers in Ukraine. You have the Siberian battalion, you have the Free Russians, and and of course the Chechens, but there are all like 8 or 10 different exile Russian
a lot of representative of captured nation now in international battalion due to they have less number to create their own. And yes, it's not about to create like a so-called army for these nations, but it's their voluntary decision to join to Ukrainian army, to have this experience. As for example, battalion of Belarusian soldiers named Kostya Kalinovskoy, the same. They have these trainings. And yes, logically, it will be a base of national army. Then Lukashenko regime or Putin regime fall down. But really, it's not our goal. Our goal is save themselves. And our goal in this whole movement to give voice for this nation. We're not Russia. We will not decide where with borderline between Bashkort and Tatars. They must decide themselves, but without influence. As Ukraine, as Russia. But what they do need help to be prepared. Because as we see differentiation between, for example, Kosovo statehood and Palestine statehood. In Kosovo, European Union give a lot of possibility to be prepared to take responsibility for themselves. Because statehood, it's very hard to nation which don't have history to have this statehood. Even for us, when independence was proclaimed in 1991, the same, I slightly return. Why we believe that it's possible? Because when our country decide to be independent, all our society decide to be independent, majority even in Crimea vote for independence, USA President Bush come to Kiev and say, guys, don't ruin USSR.
The chicken Kiev speech,
because it will be a very tough nuclear war between you and our region, and we pledge you, we ask you, we give you what you want, but don't proclaim independency. But it can be stopped, and as we see, it was mistake because not we use nuclear weapon. We deny do that. So only one part of so-called USA every time try to fear world around to use nuclear weapon. It's Russia. So whom George must speak to, not with Ukraine,
not with Kazakhstan, not with Estonia, not with Lithuania, not with Azerbaijan. So it's wrong mistakes, and we shouldn't repeat it one more time. And also, all problem, mostly, of course, there was some problems between Croatia and Bosnia and some other, but mostly it was the former metropolis Serbia, because it have the support from French and British. So it could be much, much less bloody in Balkans if the free world recognize that Croatia and Slovenia and Bosnia and Kosovo have the same opportunity to be independent and self-determination like Serbia.
Well, there is a risk of war, of course, but we have war right now. The Russian Empire is conducting the most brutal war Europe has seen since World War II. So we already have that problem.
Yes.
But I think this history is very interesting because you talked about the 2 collapses of the Russian Empire that has happened before. You had the one in 1917, and I've used the example several times. It was interesting that you brought it up because before the German collapse in World War I, they had an offensive. They were the ones pushing the boundaries, but then they collapsed. And the same happened on the Eastern Front with Russia having an offensive, and then they collapsed. So this could happen again. But when the collapse of the Russian Empire after the First World War happened, many of these nations were independent for a couple of years. Ukraine were independent for a couple of years, and Ingria was independent.
Karelia. Even Sibir Republic and Far East Republic.
And this situation shows that it Western world in that time not take responsibilities, not as a management of this territory, but give sources economically, politically.
Recognizing it's very important.
Yes, because Poland was a part of Russia Empire, but was recognized by Western, and okay, they save their statehood. Okay, in some kind, yes, Russia have influence, create a puppy regime after Second World War, but still it was independent country till the end. So the main what Western country must understand after all this lesson, it's impossible to be out. It's impossible to see a Putin as a source of decision because he can control all the territory, or we don't know what happened there, we afraid there, this territory maybe something unpleasant will be happened in the future. But yes, acting war are more dangerous with possible future war, because still possible future war we have possibility to stop. When we talk an example for our fear of Western, its influence of China. Guys, China influence in Russia now highest than ever been because of this war. Russia depend from China. And only who can balance this influence, it's region who don't need China help. Why? Because they will actively work with Western country.
And Eastern, like Japan, South Korea, Taiwan.
Okay, it's civilized country, yes. Let's look on Mongolia. It was long-term, totally communist country with total control, like between two big communist giants. But now it's liberal democratic country. Yes, they couldn't have possibility to arrest Putin. We do understand what happened next to them, yes. But in reality, they now talking about NATO-based. They have close collaboration with Western looks from civilization point of view, yes, country. And in reality, we have a lot of allies with Mongolian people on a ground. Why? Because they do understand in which situation Ukraine are. So only active position. And I don't tell, it's quite for us, it will be a good decision to give us soldiers with weapon and so on. And for occupied, captured nation, it will be too, like the best scenario. But we do understand it's like a limitation of possibility. To invite diaspora of captured nation on a global or in parliament to speak loudly, to talk about their history. Because yes, Russia create situation that they are not exist. They are invisible. For our society, for democracy society, it's a disaster when we don't see a part of our society. For example, in USSR, we don't see people with disabilities. Why? Because majority of people don't need pandus and our mechanism. So why we must see this small number of people?
It wasn't small, really, because...
But when you come to in Western country, you see that a lot of people have these problems, but they are freely walking on the street, visit restaurant, and so on. So the difference between totalitarian and democracy regime use diversity for sources for development. Totalitarian regime try to create a unique type of
I think fascism is the word you're looking for.
People who are not thinking, who are not acting without some permission. So like a mechanism, not a George Orwell type.
But if you have 2 more years of war in Ukraine, then perhaps people with disabilities will be the majority of the Russian people.
Unfortunately, yeah. It means that time is very important. What we speaking about is very urgent. If I want to a little bit add what Yaroslav was speaking about, but at first a little bit joke. Mongolia, great example that everything is possible. So it became de facto independent only in 1992. The Euro, it was from the after Tsin Empire, I think it was 1911, something like that. But it was under the effective control of Moscow and a little bit Beijing. And when USSR collapsed, which is the main war crimes of history, tell this geopolitical catastrophe of 20th century is the best what happened with the world in 20th century. Because people from Berlin till Mongolia have the opportunity to become really free and independent. And of course, the Mongolian people are laughing when they somebody like Putin or Tarl Carlson or some other not very smart guys say something about all the card, about all the maps. So Mongolia know how to be empire, which control mostly whole Eurasia, but they are normal people now. They don't want to repeat in Beijing or repeat in Moscow or something like that. And it's you asked, Jørn, a very important question about the USSR example and collapse of Russia. So one of the streets in people in European Union, NATO country, US, it's they are thinking that it's much more better to have one call, one person who ruled this territory, and I send them. Okay, you have the example of USSR. Now you have not one telephone number in Moscow, but you have 15. You have there in Astana, in Kiev, in Tallinn, in Vilnius, in Baku. Is this better for you? Of course it's better, because if there was still one number in Moscow, so Putin will use people from Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and also Ukraine, not against only Ukraine, but against Finland, Norway, Germany, and so on. And it means that we should think when we are speaking about the decolonization of Moscovia, like the last colonial empire of Europe, not like the target, but a tool. This could bring the really long-term peace of stability in Europe, in Arctic, if we also will thinking about the reconstruction of post-Russian spaces, how to make these future independent states successful and a part of our free world. Because after the USSR collapse, we have the great example of such successful country like Estonia or Lithuania, but we also have the own full example of Turkmenistan, which are a totalitarian state. But nevertheless, it means that Turkmenistan problem is its problem inner. So it's problem
could Turkmenistan have been so authoritarian without Moscow?
So at least they have to change to switch. It's also important. So it means that if we were looking for this category in risk management, it means that all common risk, which of course will be when Russia will dissolve, but it's much, much less than have there only one united terroristic states with nukes. And about one previous question we have about the forces. We have, of course, not a lot of these people have their separate units, but have units inside, for example, Free Russia, people of Karels, Kuban, Don, Bashkorts, and other. And it's also history don't repeat, but it could show some reference. So when it was the First World War, and there was Russia army, Russian imperialistic army, Romanov's army, it's important to understand that Ukrainian people, like the Poles, like the Finns, were a part of this army. So for more than 4 years, Ukrainian Poles and Finland was in this army fighting against also some Ukrainian Poles in Austro-Hungarian army. But then in 1917, this part of these forces become Ukrainization of the front. So they become a future part of Ukrainian army. And our leaders, like Petlura, like Skoropadsky, other was before it, they become leaders of independent Ukraine, but before it, they was a part of this Russian army.
The same situation with Mannerheim, one of the creator of Finnish independent country, who was a Russian Empire general, with very good perspective in Moscow and Sweden roots. So it was like a symbol of Nordic. Yes, somehow in history he do some mistakes, but still it was shown that even when we speak with non-ethnically Russian leaders of local community, now they part of this vertical. But in the future, they could be a part of decision to make this vertical more democratic, refederalization, decentralization, and in final, we must not afraid to give them possibility to be free, because Finland, it's a part of common security policy, it's a part of EU, NATO, and so on, but from history perspective, not so long period of time, it was a part of Russia. So
Absolutely.
the same.
But we have these examples from 1991 as well. You had there were skirmishes in Lithuania, and Lithuanians died in combat with Soviet forces, and Gorbachev actually gave the same order to the Soviet commander in Tallinn to do the same against the Estonians. But that general, an Air Force general who flew Su-25s in Afghanistan, he refused to do that order.
Yes.
And instead he went home to Chechnya, because that was Dudayev, and started the independence movement there. So yeah, history rhymes, and you would see the same example if things start falling apart today as well.
And
Yes.
I think it's also important to remember the Wagner rebellion when we talk about Russia's stability, because I guess no one saw that one coming, especially not the people inside the Kremlin. And we have reports from that day that a lot of Russian generals and people in the riot police responsible for the defense of Moscow, they were not answering their phone. They were turning the phone off and going to the dacha.
Let's see where this goes.
Yeah, because no one wanted
the
to.
same was when USSR broken down. A lot of generals was in dacha and waiting what happened next.
Because it's better not to take part than to support the wrong side. And this time Putin won the battle against Prigozhin for now at least. Or at least he won the battle against Prigozhin. I guess we can say that because Prigozhin is not among us anymore, which I guess is not. I'm not sure if a Russia run by Prigozhin would be a better Russia or not. But
who knows?
Who knows? But what is there any region of Russia you think are more likely to try to get their independence now than others? Because we saw the war in Chechnya, but right now they're kind of the Kadyrov family.
It's very fragile. The same. Any centralization has a weak side. When Kadyrov will be died, and it can happen really very quickly, it will be momentum to change. And yes, still, when we look to the perspective, from the political side, the main, who have the better situation, it's Ichkeria, because their history of independence are very, very on a year. So they talking about that, they living about the diaspora living as a representative of independent Ichkeria. When we look economically, it's a very interesting situation, because, for example, Tatarstan can be independent and very effective country right now. They don't need any external help. The economy are quite developed, and independent of Tatarstan stopped war in 1 minute, because majority of main defensive economy situated in Kazakhstan. When we look for sources, Sakha or Tuva can be like a Siberian Kuwait, because now they receive from returning only 1 or 2% of their budget, their own budget, because Russia's system for budgeting is all money comes to Moscow, and Moscow returns something. In Tatarstan, it's 20%. In Tuva or Sakha, it's 1 or 2%.
But that has changed as well, hasn't it? Because I think it's maybe Bashkortostan, 10 years ago, they had their own oil company, and then they facilitated the resources locally. But then it was centralized because
it was back in 19th when the elite of Tatarstan and Bashkortostan have this deal with Moscow, because they also were looking for full independence, and they have the act of sovereignty. But when they saw the war against the Ichkeria, they decided not to push it, and it was like a deal between the establishment elites. But they know that they make mistakes. Now they understand that, of course, you could make agreement with Moscow, but 1, 2, 3 years.
But that's so Cherkess situation.
And the same with Ukrainian. We lose this war 100 years ago, and then we have Holodomor. So it was a genocide of Ukraine. Why we now will fight until the end, even if I hope it's never will be, but if our allies will stop to support us, or like it was with US, we still, like Yaroslav will say, will fight him, because we know that there's could be any ceasefire, so they will come and just kill us without the fighting. And it's also where when you ask who could be the first one who could start this process of final dissolution of Moscovian Empire, I would say that it could surprise us, because we now are looking for some situation in some way how it now, but it will be real the black swan. So, for example, when somebody asked me this question, I have my list of preferable, and I would say the first one is Ingria, because I think that it were mostly everything could start in big cities. Unfortunately, now people in Moscow and St. Petersburg who was quite democratic, even when it was first Putin time, there was 20-30% of people who vote against Putin, but now they are shy. But probably it could, from my side, could be St. Petersburg, Ingria region. It also could be Sakha or Bashkortostan or Komi or Arkalmiki. But the last moment, I was surprised just 2 months ago. The real demonstration and opposition exists in Altai Republic. It was so shy, but now they have a leader. Everything depends, like you say, this general in Tartu was Johar Dudayev, and we have this resistance of Chechen Republic of Ichkeria 19 is much more higher than in other North Caucasus region, because also the people is social capital. If you have the people who leaders, I mean really leadership, not like we have this in some houses now in the world. It depends that it could change a lot. So in this Altai region, they found this few person who started, and now it's a lot of things are changing. So probably it could be in some region where we are not waiting it. For example,
and
Siberia.
Russia isn't prepared.
Yeah, they aren't prepared. They're really fragile. So we should help to because it will be. Yeah, but we don't have a time, because every day people are dying, and Moscow preparing to make this big war against the NATO countries. They're really preparing, and of course People Republic of China preparing to attack Taiwan and so on.
And Russia needs additional resources. Due to that, after occupation Donbass and Lugansk, they militarized all what happened. Now we have children who grow up in this occupied circumstance, and all of them are militarized. All of them will be used as sources for this weapon and using now. So we do understand that when we look on this scenario, we calculate time not in minutes or hours. We calculate time in lives of people. Because when we're talking now, in reality that some opposition from Ichkeria or Ingush or Bashkort now imprisoned and can be killed, can be torturing in that's minutes. And yes, I'm head of Committee for Freedom of Speech in Ukrainian Parliament, and yes, we have some challenges in this sphere due to martial law. But when we're talking about Russia, a lot of bloggers, leaders of thoughts, just for post in social media can be killed, can be accused and international agent. And a lot of imprisoned in Russia, proportion of representative of captured people very, very high. And it's about human life. It's about the main values of so-called civilized world, first of all, European country. And we don't have time. So we can talk a lot of this, we can discuss, we can make study, investigation, and so on. But it cost us lives. It cost us future, maybe even life of ethnical group. Because now we have information, for example, about small Inuit groups, Kereks. That's only several people of these groups are still alive. And majority of men now in Russia occupied forces.
Yep.
So this tribe disappear in very short period of time. It's a part of human culture. It's a part of our manhood. And we lose a lot of species of birds, animals. But about birds and animals, we loudly talking on different conferences and try to find mechanism to save it. When dying a nation, humanity still silent. It's, as for me, a big our joint crime. And yes, Russia colonialism due to USA manipulation was not visible. People do not know about Cherkess genocide, about Ukraine genocide, or Holodomor, only due to we are a big country and we have some communication with the world. But in Gush genocide, genocide of Crimea, Tatar, and deportation, it's still a crime. It's still not crime without reflection. And we will win when Russia Duma recognize Cherkessia as a nation of deportation and genocide committed by Moscow.
Sorry, I don't agree with you, because it should be not Russia Duma, but the Parliament of Moscow Republic or Federation.
I said Moscow Duma.
Sorry.
Just briefly, because what you mentioned, the run of Prigozhin towards Moscow. I've seen several sources, but I don't know if they're correct, but rumors that while he was rushing towards Moscow, there was, in Bashkortostan, there was text messages going out, prepare to stay indoors and things. Do you think that there are places in Russia where people are just prepared, and when the Black Swan event happens, then they activate?
In my mind, this 20 hours in 23 or 24th of June of 2023, it was a moment when not only were Moscow against Ukraine, but in general, Russian Empire could be finished if we were prepared. I mean, not Ukraine, but representative captive nation and colonial region, because this window of chance could exist in future, one time at least, but it was already, and we weren't prepared. So when it will be next time, it's very important for these people of movements understand that if they don't use this opportunity, so it means that they will be finished by this empire, by regime. And as for me, as for founder of this platform, Free Nation Post-Russia Forum, it's very important try to communicate both with movement, both with the European colleagues and American colleagues and Japanese colleagues, say that we should be prepared. So if you don't have a strategy, if you don't have a roadmaps, we could lose this opportunity. And it means not only because it's urgent, it's everyday killing Ukrainian people, but if we don't stop them now, they will start to keep Finnish people, Poland people, unfortunately probably Norway people, because I think that Medvedev, Putin, Shoigu, they are looking for Norway like a great place to occupy it. They have border, they have this Arctic way, they have China. If we won't stop them, they will try to do this. So I think that the decolonization of Moscovia is a real task for all free world to work together and try to support and make this non-violence, and very important that the result should be much more open societies, free world, and country which could trade, cooperate, and not have war one against one.
Thank you so much, Yaroslav and Oleg, and I hope you'll be back in Ukrainapodden another time.